Yeah, there's. It's interesting that Montana got its first and second cassin sparrows
Yeah.
in, in different parts of the state in the same week, and I remember something with cassin sparrow, and I didn't even think about this before you brought it up, the summer vagrancy. But when
Hmm.
there's drought, birds like cassin sparrow tend to
They're very,
move
yeah,
and
it's a known phenomenon. Yeah.
breed in places where they traditionally don't, typically further north.
Yeah, I was looking at Facebook puts up those memories every once in a while, and a couple weeks ago I was looking at some old memories, and I got some photos from North Carolina's very first record of Cassin Sparrow, which was about 7 or 8 years ago now, and it was the same situation. It was a drought in the desert Southwest, which happens from time to time, and
Yep,
I believe that summer, the same summer that North Carolina got its first record of Cassin Sparrow, there was also one in Illinois
yep,
at Montrose, and there was
yep.
one in Massachusetts as well. So when it rains, it pours, I guess, when it comes to Cassin Sparrow, and also things like limpkin, which have been all over the place lately,
Well,
wood stork in
limpkin.
Nova Scotia, and there's a lot of birds that are pushing northward to beat the heat and turning up in some unusual places.
Well, I mean, with in the case of limpkins, I think that's 100% food driven, and
Yeah, that's part of it too, no doubt.
there's or mostly food driven anyway. The invasive apple snails that they
Hmm.
have now started to eat. Um, I'm sure they ate them in Florida, but they've now spread, and we have them here in Illinois. Um,
Yeah.
and they're the big, not apple snails, mystery snails. The ones that apple
Are they?
snails are the native ones. The mystery
Yeah.
snails are the ones that are invasive, and the
Yeah.
mystery snails are the ones that people keep in goldfish tanks and so on.
Hmm.
We have those here in Illinois, and we've had now 3 or 4 limpkins in Illinois,
That's interesting.
which,
Um, we have them in North Carolina from time to time, Limpkin that is, and I think there was one here about 2 weeks ago. We've got about 15 records or so by now, but they also go after mussels. They're also prone
hmm
to which we have many invasive species in the reservoirs in the southeast as well. And yeah, Limpkin's a funny bird for a lot of reasons, but one of those reasons is because they actually do pretty well with invasive invertebrates, and
yep.
take to them pretty quickly and devour them, and their numbers are increasing
The first
counterintuitively
Illinois
because
record
of it.
was devouring mussels.
Yep. Yep.
But
Well, I
but
think we've
speaking of
speaking of
limpkin,
Lipkin. Yeah, yeah.
in the latest issue of North American Birds, which hit members'
Oh, there you go.
mailboxes this week,
That's
and
right.
is available for ABA members on our website, there is an article about limpkin, the recent phenomenon of limpkin range expansion,
Hmm.
which is some pretty fascinating stuff. And with that, I think we'll jump in here and mention
Yeah, let's just go
also,
for it.
if we're talking magazines, we're talking magazines. And we have, in the last couple of weeks, finished a project that we've been working on for quite a while. And that is a complete archive of Birding Magazine, and actually
Yeah,
all of our publications from start to finish. And the
pretty
thing
amazing.
about birding is that birding started in 1968. And now every issue, every page is available for ABA members, and you can search them. And it's an amazing resource, because going back
It
and looking
really
at some of
is.
those articles, it's
Yeah, I mean, look, the birding world has changed a lot in the last intervening 50 some years, but those articles about how to find certain birds, how to bird certain areas, how to
mm-hmm.
identify certain difficult cryptic species, that sort of stuff does not change all that much. There's a lot of like a wealth of amazing information that's there in the birding archives, and if you enjoy historic binocular ads, you can go through some of the old birding magazines and see some of the old ad copy from years
Mm-hmm.
ago, which is actually almost as interesting as the articles in some of those old magazines, frankly.
Yeah, and uh, Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. It was probably it was about the identification articles. It just had
Oh yeah.
a researcher doing some work on Empedonyx flycatchers, who was just delighted to have access to all of these because I didn't realize it, but there's a lot of information in that archive about how to identify Empedonyx flycatchers from different methods, from voice to measurements to everything in between.
An evergreen topic, as it seems. Greg, did you know what so we've got some images of some magazine covers from the 80s, are this 84, early 80s? Greg, do you know what, and this is a question that goes out to all the people watching as well, do you know what the most common cover bird species is for for Birding magazine? When we put all these archives online, I went back and actually cataloged all the different birds that have been on the cover of Birding magazine over the last 50 years. And do you know what the bird that has been on the cover most often is? It's actually a couple different species.
I
think we talked about this in the Slack chat, so you may, if you remember.
I have no clue.
Yeah.
What is it?
Hold on, I'm going to pull it up because I made a spreadsheet, and I don't know where it is right now.
All right. While you're doing that, I'm going to say hi to.
I want to see what some people have. If people have answers. Matt Gillespie says
Peregrine falcon.
Peregrine falcon, kestrel. Good choices, folks. Northern cardinal. Unfortunately, not northern cardinal. No. Peregrine falcon's been on a couple times. Kestrel has been on at least 3 times. Donna,
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good guess. Man, I don't know where
I'm just going to say Canada goose.
About this. Canada goose has not been on there. I know that one of them is bald eagle. It's been on the cover at least 4 times. And there's another one that's been tied. Bald eagle. Yeah, Jody Ford. There you go. You got it. Bald eagle is one of them. And there's another bird on there. And if I can dig up that spreadsheet, I'll see if I can find it. My computer is not looking very well for this. But bald eagle is one of them for sure. That's been on the cover. But there are some surprises. Like Eurasian Hobby, I think, has been on twice. Back in the early days of birding, they like to put like really rare birds on the cover as opposed to just really nice photos of birds. So there's some questionable photos of very rare birds in some of the early issues. Mike Daly asks, "Is this the American Bird Association fight?" No. Sadly.
No, but that does happen quite frequently.
Nor is it the website for the Swedish pop band. We've gotten that as well.
We have, but it's Mike Daly. It's quite amazing how many lawyers send us email asking for things and not even realizing that they're sending it to the American Birding Association and sending us info. And
I was actually doing some work on the ABA's LinkedIn page the other day, and you can see all the people who signed their LinkedIn profile, people who have worked with the ABA in various capacities over the years. And there was like a divorce lawyer who had said that he worked with the ABA. He clearly meant the other one. But I thought that was really funny. And I didn't know how to remove him, or I should have sent him a message and say, are you sure this is the right ABA, bud? Yeah. Anyway. All right, so shall we what else do you have for us, Greg?
Yes, I do. I have one other thing, and that is
before we get to the birds.
Our summer nesting appeal is ongoing, and we would love it if you who watch us here would go over to aba.org/give and help us keep the lights on and keep our programs like the Young Birder camps and the Young Birder of the Year mentoring programs, keep those things alive because we can't do it without you guys.
Yep, absolutely. We don't ask for money all that often, but we do have 2 big appeal seasons every year, the holiday appeal at the end of the year and the nesting season appeal. And we certainly appreciate anything that you can throw, any money you can throw at us to help us reach our appeal goal every year. We're doing actually pretty well, but you could always use more support.
Thank you to everyone.
Helps us do. Absolutely. If you've already made a donation, thank you so much for that. And it helps us keep doing these keep providing these free resources for the birding community, for the birding public. And we know you enjoy them, and we certainly enjoy doing them. So anything you can offer is very, very think we're very grateful for.
All right, and with that,
Some good ABBA puns
yeah,
going on in the
yeah,
in the
I saw
comments.
that.
Mama Kia, nice job, Chris Mateo.
Birding Queen.
Before we get going on the questions or the photos, we'll talk just a little bit about what we do. The ABA, one of the resources that the ABA provides is a What's This Bird Facebook group. It's essentially a crowdsourced birding community. If people have photos of birds that they would like identified, they post them in that group, and our community helps to identify them.
Like
it can
this
be
one.
this one right here. We have bird photos of varying qualities, some more challenging than others, but we certainly enjoy tackling all of them. And what we see when we go through this, when we admin that group, is we see certain species, certain interesting photos that pop up from time to time. And what Greg and I do is come on live every couple weeks or so. The emphasis on the or so lately. It's been a busy spring.
Busy time.
And kind of talk through those identifications for your benefit, for our benefit. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, anything about birds, while we're doing this, we're happy to take a little pause and talk about that as well. So leave your comments in the comments in the comments section. No matter where you're watching it, we are coming to you live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and newly on Twitch. We have one person watching on Twitch. Hello.
Right on. Hello, Twitchster.
How are you?
We are
Twitchster. Is that what they call?
I don't know. I just
Twitch,
made that.
Twitchsters?
I just made that up. So I'm probably gonna get flamed for that now. But
you're gonna get canceled, Greg. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna get canceled.
No tolerance for Twitch mistakes. All right, let's get to it.
Let's get to this bird. So this is the time of year where we get a lot of pictures of this kind of bird this time of year.
It's young waiter season.
Young waders, and I think anybody who's even familiar with even pop art can recognize this as a wading bird, a heron or egret or something along those lines. We can
make a note to our friends overseas in the UK. They call shorebirds waders and not wading birds.
This is true.
Just to clarify, we're using the North American term for waders, which is herons, egrets, ibis, storks, those sorts of things.
And this looks like it was in a swampy area by the size of the branches and stuff. It's kind of a mid-sized bird, but there's several species that kind of look like this time of year, and I think we can, with looking at the big eye and the chunky bill and everything, we can kind of narrow this down to one of the two night herons. It doesn't have a long neck. It doesn't have a long neck like a great blue heron or a little blue heron.
And for those birds, those egretta and ardea, those are the genera for those birds.
Yeah.
They tend to have very long serpentine necks, whereas the night herons are sort of more squat and stocky. Thick-necked birds. So black-crowned night heron or yellow-crowned night heron, those are our two night herons in the ABA area.
And also mentioning, the bitterns, the least bittern is
bitterns.
A tiny little thing. The American bittern is a really very differently shaped bird. It's got this compact body and rather short legs and this enormously long neck and tiny head. And it's a really oddly shaped bird. And when you see one, it's very difficult to mistake it for anything else, even if, you're unfamiliar with juvenile night herons, which are very similarly plumaged in that brown and white kind of streakiness.
Indeed.
But what we have here is a bird that's transitioning out of that plumage and into the adult plumage. And these get really confusing this time of year. So let's look at structure.
Yeah, absolutely. When I'm looking at the two night herons, when I'm thinking about them, black-crowned is a bit more short-legged. It's a bit more stocky-necked, and the bill tends to be kind of longer and light-colored.
So I'm going to move to the comparison.
This bird. Yeah,
I'm going to move to the comparison. So here is the bird in question compared with the other species that it is most frequently confused with. And I think we'll cut to the chase where Nate was going. The bird in question on the left is a yellow-crowned night heron.
A yellow-crowned night heron, correct.
And on the right, we can see it compared with a black-crowned night heron of the same basic age.
Yep, similar age. Yep.
But note the difference in structure. Mm-hmm. How much longer-legged the yellow-crowned is. It's longer-necked. And the bill shape is also key. That spike of a bill, that heavy spike of a bill, crawfish crusher.
With the yellow crown. Yeah, it's like a baton almost.
Yeah.
Kind of similar length all the way almost to the tip. Whereas the black crowned night heron has a kind of a longer, more slender bill that kind of curves downward a little bit. Mm-hmm. And of course, the color is great to look at too, because yellow crowned night heron almost always has a very dark bill, dark all over, mm-hmm. Black or dark gray. Whereas the black crowned night heron there on the right has a pale mandible. You can see that pale mandible very well in that bird. Yep.
And it's also yellow crown has a subtly larger eye, and the combination of that spike or baton-like bill and the big eye gives it just a different kind of an impression than the black crowned.
Yep, for sure.
These two species are exploding, especially in urban areas all over eastern North America, and black crowned goes up. All over, really. But city parks.
They're really funny that way. They nest in these very kind of loose rookeries, a lot like other wading birds, the herons and egrets, which tends to nest in large colonies. Night herons don't really do that, especially the yellow crowns. I've seen yellow crowned night herons nesting in very large old trees in established neighborhoods, quite far mm-hmm. from any water. And they make such a sloppy nest, like their nest is very thin and flat, and there's not really much to it. Right. It's a very, very strange thing to see something like a yellow-crowned night heron sitting up in a large oak tree on top of its spindly nest that looks like it could fall apart at any moment in a place where you wouldn't necessarily expect them.
Yeah, there's one of the traditional places to find yellow-crowned night heron in Illinois is down south near St. Louis. In mm-hmm. Granite City, and there's a park in the middle of Granite City, and it's quite a distance away from any water, but not for the heron as they fly. Right. But it's a busy park with baseball diamonds and all kinds of stuff, and mm-hmm. as you go to look for them, you walk down the path with people bicycling and pushing strollers, and then just right over your head, there's yellow-crowned night heron nesting. Oh, and look, there's two more.
Yep. Yeah. Cool birds. Definitely one to look out for these days. Shall we move on?
We are. We're going to move on to Georgia.
Moving up slightly north. Donna Shulman notes that they have yellow-crowned night herons nesting on fire escapes in Queens, New York. That is
nice.
That is really neat.
Night herons are rapidly adapting to urban life. Yeah. I mean, especially
no shortage of invasive crawfish in a lot of those ponds, and they take those real quickly. All right, so we've got a much smaller bird here.
We do. Look at it.
Very small body, relatively large head. We can tell these look like small leaves, so I think it's pretty safe to say that this bird is towards the very small end of the spectrum. It's very slight, kind of lanky. The head looks awfully large. The body looks awfully slender, and has a very long tail that is black in the center and white on the outside of it. Mm-hmm. I can also see sort of an eye ring there. That eye ring is nice.
Yeah, the eye ring looks pretty bold. I mean, the bird is kind of almost colorless and featureless. I mean, sometimes you can tell that that's something with the image itself, but the colors in the leaves and everything look pretty close. So I'm guessing that that's the actual color of the bird.
Safe to say.
And this is what happens in summer to a lot of species. As their plumage wears, they don't look like the illustrations in the field guide, and especially things like sparrows can be very confusing as the feathers wear and the pattern wears down or the color wears out. Yeah,
in a field guide, you'll see a sparrow, and it'll show just really nice, crisp, clean streaking on it. But as you get further into the summer, especially once the birds have already fledged chicks, and a lot of species, especially in the southeast, have already fledged at least their first batch of chicks. They really wear fast because that's when they start molting, right? So birds typically do 3, maybe 4 very high energy intensive actions during their year. and that is nesting and taking care of chicks, migration, and molt. Because molt is very energy intensive for a lot of birds, and they tend not to do these things at the same time because it would be too much to do any of those two things, any two of those three things at the time that they're doing any other thing. So as soon as the birds get rid of that first batch of chicks out of the nest, fledged out, that's when a lot of birds start molting immediately. And so this time of year, a lot of birds that put out one batch of chicks have done so, and so they're going to start molting. And those feathers are going to get real worn. They're going to get washed out. They're going to look messy. They're going to look a little bit different than the birds you see in the field guides.
Yeah. So we're going to go on structure here, but there's also some plumage features we can see. So as you said, the bird is small. It's got a thin warbler-like bill, but with two things really, really stand out here is that long tail.
Very long tail.
And the bold white eye ring. And the
sure.
The white eye ring and the long tail with the white outer tail feathers like that really is only one bird in Georgia, and that's blue-gray gnatcatcher.
And there should be a lot of them around right now.
Yeah.
It's one of the more frequently encountered birds I see on my breeding bird surveys that I've been doing the last couple of weeks. A lot of blue-gray gnatcatchers around, a lot of chicks around. They make a ton of noise. They do that kind of whispery bzz, 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 bzz,
Yep.
kind of sound. They respond to pitching really well, so you can frequently get really good looks at them. They're very gonna have a lot of attitude. They're neat little birds. But yeah, that pattern on the tail is really diagnostic. You can see it when they fly around. You can see it when they kind of flick their tails from side to side, so they like to show that pattern off quite a bit. Yeah, a bird that a lot of people in the southern tier of the ABA area, all the way across to the west, should be on the lookout for these days. If you haven't.
And the posture of this bird. If this was a video and we could see this bird moving around, the way the wings are drooped and the tail is up, and gnatcatchers are sassy, as Nate was saying. They flip their tails back and forth and flip their wings.
Little mini mockingbirds in their structure as well.
Jennifer Gill and I said at the same time, sassy little birds. All right, we're going to leave the sassy bird in Georgia, and we are going to go to Boston.
Woo! I had to look a little bit closer on this bird, Greg. This is kind of a tough one. It's a weird angle. It's it's difficult.
Blurry photo somebody grabbed as the bird was flying away, which
happens a lot.
Which is the reason I picked this, because this is a common thing with this bird. You're walking along, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, what the heck was that? And you get a look just like this. But the look is diagnostic, and we can certainly work with this.
I can
practically
hear this bird
yes.
as it's flying away too, because they typically make a very grumpy noise as they fly away. But yeah. So the things that stand out to me on this bird is, well, first of all, let's try and determine which direction this bird is going.
Yes.
Because which end is the head end and which is the tail end, right?
Exactly.
Because it could go either way.
It could, but the one thing we can see that tells us definitely this bird is flying away is that right wing that's dropped down. And we can clearly see the wing coverts and the primary and secondary feathers.
Yep. Yeah.
Whereas if the bird was flying towards us,
correct,
we wouldn't see that. We would see the leading edge of the wing.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. The kind of scalloped edges of the wings on there. So yeah, so what we've got here is a bird that's got kind of a long, thin bill. It is dark all over, very dark, and it's flying over water. That's a good clue as well. So, it's hard to determine any sort of size in this picture, so I'm not gonna try to do that. But sort of
birds,
all dark. Please.
Yeah, I mean, birds that have a long bill like this, that are kind of chunky, and sort of this kind of darkish bluish color. Belted kingfisher comes to mind, and
could be. They have white. They have some white in the upper edge, the dorsal side of the wing, kind of at the base of the primaries too. So you'd see
they have white flashes in the wings that are very noticeable. So we can rule out belted kingfisher. If you look closely, you can see some color at the tail end of the bird. And that...
Yeah, and I think the color is a little oversaturated here, but I think that generally speaking, the color on the bird itself is going to be relatively true, or true enough
It's true
for
enough.
what we're trying to do. Yeah.
It's true enough. And so, we see this sort of a dark cap on the front and some color that looks like orange or red on the back end of it. Yep. And when this bird flies away from you in the wild, when you're walking around the edge of a pond and you startle it and it takes off, as Nate said, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear the bird call, which is a very grumbly little squark.
Yeah.
And you're going to see this bird with orange feet flying away. And that is a green heron.
It is a green heron, one of our smaller herons, our second smallest heron. Yep. I mean, I can imagine the situation where this bird was taken, someone walking along a pond in their neighborhood with maybe some willows kind of hanging over one side of it. They like to kind of roost and hide in there. You get too close, the bird flies off. And green heron for this one for me, for sure. It's generally the only sort of all dark heron like this. Someone suggested tricolored heron in the comments, Jennifer Gill. Not a bad guess. Tricolored heron is generally going to have some white on the belly, and I think that we would be able to see that very well in this. And they'll also have kind of longer trailing legs. Yeah. Yep. Green heron is a relatively stocky legged heron. And green heron for me.
It's kind of shaped almost like a crow went from a certain angle. It's just a very stocky,
little bit
thick, dark bird.
Yeah, and if we were looking more kind of straight on, perpendicular on this bird on the side, they're kind of front heavy. Like they're kind of like the head kind of sticks out quite a bit ahead of the wings, giving them kind of a very unique shape when they fly away. And I don't know, green heron, great bird, love to see him. I have a green heron story. When I was at McGee Marsh last month for the biggest week in American birding, they usually have some green herons nesting along the boardwalk there. And, everyone's there looking for singing warblers. We're following the singing warblers around, looking at them singing in the tops of the trees. And there was a green heron sitting in the top of a tree singing in the sense that a green heron can. And it was clearly like displaying or something, but it would sit up in the top of the tree and be like, I'd never heard that before. It was really neat.
Cool.
Beautiful song for a beautiful bird.
So,
I'm being sarcastic, it was
Ronan O'Kara asks, do you want to clarify against juvenile night herons? So,
yeah,
sure.
Why not?
Well, a juvenile night heron is going to be brown and white or brown and buff patterned, almost reminiscent of a bittern, but especially on the wings, the upper wings, you're going to see some pattern.
Some speckles.
In between, as that the night herons we were looking at earlier, the color isn't going to be this kind of a dark greenish blue. It's going to be more gray. That the dark cap maybe is going to stand out a little bit more. Adult night heron should be no problem at all because the adults are boldly patterned,
especially on the head. Yep,
especially on the head. And the black. Neither one of them has orange feet. They have yellowish or yellow green or pinkish feet, depending on the season and the species.
Yeah. And even a relatively short-legged heron like black crowned night heron, I think I would expect to see its feet dragging behind its tail a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in descriptions, I've heard many people describe green heron both in What's This Bird and in other forums where we help people identify, and quite frequently they describe it as having an orange tail because they see those orange feet sticking out and don't realize that it's actually the feet.
That's interesting. I suppose we could do least bittern too, which would be very unlikely. But I was in South Carolina last week, and I did flush a least bittern from like a very tall grassy field. It was totally unexpected. But as it flew, the first thing that I noted when I saw this bird fly by was, dang, that thing is so small. Least bittern is a tiny, tiny little thing, like literally robin-sized, very small heron. And when they fly, you can see that they have big, buffy patches on the top side of their wings that make them stand out pretty well.
They're quite startling when they flush out in front of you.
Yeah. It's a neat little bird, and I do want to emphasize little. Like it is like shockingly small. If you get a good look at a least bittern, that is a little heron.
Yeah. So now we're going to go up to Canada.
Manitoba. Yeah, so we're in the plains, in the eastern plains. Um, what we have here is a bird with a long, broad wings, a relatively short, broad tail, and a short beak. I think we can safely put this one in the raptors
Hmm.
category, and we could even narrow it down a little bit further into the genus of hawks in the buteo or buteo, however you want to pronounce that genus, which are the big, broad-winged soaring hawks
You mean you're not in the
found all over.
buteo camp?
Buteo. No, it's Buteo or Buteo for me.
I,
But I never know how to pronounce those Latin names anyway. You threw me for a loop
yes.
with Impedonex or how did you pronounce that earlier?
Oh gosh, it's I do it like plover and plover. I mix it up
Plover and
just to
plover,
keep
right?
people
Whatever, just to
confused.
keep
It's
people.
like
Yeah.
Empidonax, Empedonics.
Impedonics. That there it is. Yeah. Whatever. Whatever.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, but what we're seeing here is we can see a lot of pattern on this bird,
For sure.
and we've got these white underwings with the dark remiges. We've got the dark primary feathers and dark
Remiges.
secondary feathers.
What is a remige, Greg?
That is the primary
Fingers.
feathers,
Yeah.
fingers. Um,
Yes. All dark.
and all dark all the way from the body all the way out to the wingtips. This bird's got kind of long wings, maybe a little bit pointed.
I would
Um,
say that.
you can see kind of four fingers on there.
Yeah,
Um,
if you're thinking in terms of like the basic buteo, where you kind of want to start when you're trying to identify as those, it'd be red-tailed hawk, which is the widespread across the continent, probably one of the most widespread birds in North America. Period. Yeah, comparing that bird, the red-tailed hawk, to this bird, the wings are longer here, or they appear longer. I don't know if they're
mhm.
actually longer. The perspective is that they're longer and a bit more pointed, which is sort of the important thing to note here. Long,
Yeah,
narrow,
and this
kind of
bird also
pointed
has a
wings.
clean belly and a dark chest, which is kind of the opposite
Sure
of
does.
red-tailed hawk, especially the
It
eastern
is.
ones. And red-tailed hawk has dark patagials, which are the sort of
Patagials,
leading edge of the wing, sort of the,
shoulders,
the
wrists. Actually, strictly
bicep.
speaking, it's the wrists.
Well,
Yeah,
yes,
or
it is.
the forearm. But shoulderies, I guess. If we're like on a red-shouldered hawk, it's actually the forearm that's red. But red
Yeah.
forearmed hawk does not really work.
Well,
This
well, we
was
might
it's not
we
the
should
forearm.
we could. I
It's
mean,
like here, the
red-tailed.
biceps,
It is
right?
a really well-named bird, so that's one that we
Yeah.
shouldn't change. Um,
Bird bone structure is different than human bone structure.
yes, it is. Um, but all these things put together, the brown chest, the white belly, the very dark flight feathers with the white, clean white underwings,
The
and
location.
the location being in Manitoba, eastern Manitoba, Swainson's hawk is the one that we
Yeah.
expect to look like this up there.
I believe it's pronounced Manitoba, Greg. Saskatchewan, Manitoba,
Manitoba.
Ontario, Manitoba.
Hey.
Sorry to all our Manitoban Winnipeg friends listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, Swainson's hawk, one of our classic birds of the Great Plains, of the North American Great Plains. Interestingly enough, one of the classic birds of the South American Great Plains as well,
Yeah.
in the South American summer, because they migrate so far all the way down to the pampas of Argentina and Uruguay and Brazil, where they spend our winter, which is the other southern hemisphere summer. They are one of the longest migrating birds in North America. And
Yeah.
long migrating birds tend to have very long wings that are sort of pointed. That's a feature that helps birds travel very long distances with relatively little energy output. And Swainson's hawk definitely has that. They eat bugs. They really like to eat bugs. Grasshoppers.
They're
And locusts.
they're really
Yeah.
resourceful.
Yep.
They nest in Illinois in a few places where
Mhm.
there's ground squirrels, and they tend to like the Franklin's ground squirrels. They like,
Hmm.
uh, but when they're migrating, yeah, they will spend a lot of time in the air picking off dragonflies and cicadas
Yeah.
and whatever they can catch up there.
Yeah. We have a question in the comments
Yes.
in Facebook. Bryce Remsburg asks, any interesting birds in Kansas, especially shorebirds? Don't know if there are too many shorebirds in Kansas just yet, though in another month there probably will be.
Yeah, this is
Um,
this is the the little in-between period for shorebirds.
Yeah, so most of the shorebirds right now, at least our breeding long distance migrant shorebirds, are on the tundra right now, raising chicks and trying to take advantage of the very long days up on the tundra in the northern Great Plains. Do you have something to add, Greg?
I did, because a lot of shorebirds, one interesting thing about shorebirds, not all, but a lot of the species, they come through very quickly in the spring, and we see different species at different times. Semi-palmated sandpiper is one of the latest migrants, and we're seeing them now along with white rump, which is another really late migrant. And when they get up to their Arctic breeding grounds, they lay their eggs, they have their chicks, and then they're like, see ya, and they take off.
Yep.
And they leave the chicks to fend for themselves. And somehow the chicks find their way south. But that's you start seeing shorebirds again in August. They've already bred and turned around,
sometimes
and they're coming
even in
back.
July.
And late July and August, exactly.
Yeah, so some great places in Kansas. Kansas is actually well known for some phenomenal shorebird locations in the middle part of the state. In particular, Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, both kind of massive water impoundments. Quivira is a big salt lake. A lot of really cool, although they have snowy plovers nesting right now in Quivira, if you wanted to go out and check that out. A lot of great shorebird habitat. And, come the next month, end of July into August, you're going to be seeing a lot of shorebirds moving southward, starting with the adults. As Greg said, they leave pretty soon after the chicks hatch. And then, in a few weeks later, the chicks are going to be the first shorebirds are going to be making their way back south again. There are a few places on the continent that are as much fun if you enjoy shorebirds than Quivira and Cheyenne Bottoms in August.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it later in the summer as pictures start coming through. But those birds coming down, those birds coming down, as Mate was talking earlier about the gnatcatcher, they're molting. And they start to look really ragged and confusing. And then to make it even more confusing, the very crisp, fresh, beautiful juveniles with brand new plumage come and join in with them. And it's just
so you've got birds that are the same species that look totally different because because the adults are looking pretty rough and the juveniles are looking absolutely immaculate.
Yeah, I mean when you see an August leaf sandpiper walking around with adult walking around with a fresh juvenile, you're like,
it's like different birds, totally different birds. Yeah,
and that's where you got to go by structure and things like leg color.
Some of those juvenile plumages are really fantastic. Like Baird's sandpiper is just
well, and least, I mean, that's a bird we take for granted, but when you get a juvenile in fresh plumage, I mean, just those rich chestnut rufous and the pattern, I mean, they're really beautiful birds.
More to shorebirds than just little gray things on the far end of your scope view.
Not shorebirds.
Speaking of shorebirds,
they're in the water.
Sorry, oops, I didn't see what you're going to do with this.
But they're in the water, so they could be shorebirds. I mean, so this is something that we get a lot this time of year, and that is robins bathing in puddles, which this robin is doing. This is an American robin. I think everybody can identify this bird. And it's hot and they don't care. They'll just get in the mud and get wet. But what's that other thing behind it?
Well, I like that the robin is here because most of us are pretty familiar with the size and shape and structure of American robin in our own yards. And so we can kind of look at this bird behind it and compare it directly to that robin in the foreground. So it's quite a bit smaller. It's got a more conical shaped bill, kind of a shorter, thicker bill, and it is dark legs. It is all over brown, kind of a grayish brown without much anything else going on.
It's the dark dun colored, very nondescript bird. So that again, the structure here. Now, one thing we cannot see in this photo, we can't see how long the tail is or how long the wings are. So we're going to have to go by location in Maryland. And that short conical bill, because when we look at the few birds that are this color and basic shape, there's a couple, 2, 3 of them, but they have different structure, especially the bill. So that's what we're going to focus on here, and that sort of heavy finch-like or blackbird-like bill.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you might be inclined to look at a kind of a grayish brown bird with a heavy, thick bill and think, oh, this is a sparrow. But there are a few things kind of striking against sparrow. I wish we could see more of the bird. I assume that in the field you could see more, but the structure of the wings and the tail are quite a bit different from most of the sparrows, and the legs are quite a bit longer than a lot of sparrows as well.
And just heavier and thicker and it's
bird.
and this is kind of big for a sparrow. I mean, this bird is bigger than most of our sparrows.
Even the biggest sparrows are not even close to the size of a robin, even though the robin is in the foreground here. Most of our sparrows are quite a bit smaller than a robin.
Yeah, so this is we'll just cut to the chase here. This is a either a female or a young brown-headed cowbird, and we see them in this.
This is a bird we see a lot in What's This Bird?
And a lot in the summertime.
Yeah. So if you see a bird with almost no discernible features aside from the kind of grayish brown all over and the kind of thick black bill, definitely a brown-headed cowbird is a good place to start. They are icterids, so they are blackbirds and orioles. And they're shaped more like those. They are sort of stocky when you compare them to things like red-winged blackbird or Baltimore oriole or common grackle or things like that, but more lanky than a sparrow.
So it looks like Ronan O'Cara.
Before we get to you, Ronan, and you've totally predicted
he did
what we're going to talk about. Stolen our thunder, Ronan. We have a question on YouTube that I want to address just real quickly.
Oh yeah.
Wood thrush quadruple ones, wood thrush 1111 says, going to Witless Bay, Newfoundland in 2 weeks. What should I look for? Thanks. Oh man, this is such a wonderful time of year to go to Atlantic Canada. I was actually there in July in the summer before the pandemic. So I guess that was 2019.
Yep.
And Witless Bay is just phenomenal. Make sure you get one of those boats that goes out to the seabird colonies so you can see the puffins nesting and see the humpback whales in the area. There's a lot of both of them, and it is just a really, really pleasant way to spend some time. And if you have a chance, go down to Cape St. Mary's with a big gannet colony there. Not just gannets, but it's mostly gannets, but there's razorbills and murres of both species and kittiwakes and all sorts of really cool stuff. Man, Newfoundland is such a wonderful place to be in July. You're going to have an amazing time. Wood thrush 1111.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
and if you go to our to our website and click around, you'll find an ad for Newfoundland and with some birding info. You click through to that, and there's some birding info on sort of basics of Newfoundland tourism and birding spots.
Yeah, our friend Jared Clark, who shows up every once in a while, does bird tours here. And there you go. Tristan Jobin just said, get in touch with Jared Clark.
Yeah,
he's super.
Tristan's and, we were just about to go there, Tristan.
He's obviously super, and he can get you set up on places to go or even take you out if that's something that you want to do. But it's a great time of year to do that, and it's hard to go wrong. A lot of good food, a lot of good birds, a lot of good whales all over the place. It's a neat place to be. All right, moving on.
Moving on back to Ronan preempting us here. Looking back at that cowbird, the other bird that is frequently showing up at people's feeders, and looking at this cowbird again, I think I notice a little bit of a fleshy gape there, which makes me think this is a juvenile.
Maybe so.
I also see some feather, the white tips on the greater coverts on the wing. Now this bird is another one that shows up in people's feeders and backyards at this time.
Well, Greg, this is just a brown-headed cowbird with a longer bill. Next.
Right.
Moving on.
Next, goodbye.
It's exactly the same as the bird we saw before. It's everything we said about it, with the exception of the bill, I guess, is exactly the same. It's all over kind of brownish,
pretty
gray.
much, yeah.
It's got very long wings. Not those long wings, relatively short.
Very long wings. And looking at those wings, look at how perfectly formed the feathers are. And with the beautiful fringes. This tells us that this is a juvenile. This bird was hatched this year.
Those are brand new flight feathers.
Brand new feathers. And you can see that it's got some of the brown juvenile feathering left on the back and in the wings, and the gray that'll turn black, just like with the cowbird, is starting to come in. But again, structure. We couldn't see the cowbird back end very well, but cowbird does not have these long wings like this. No. And look at how short the tail is. Yeah. When this bird flies, it looks like a dart or something. It has these long wings and short tails and looks triangular. Yeah. But the bill is the giveaway here. Look at that long, spiky bill.
Yep. Yeah, Alex Cruz notes when he first saw this bird, he did a double take and thought it was a type of Cyclades with a sharp bill, habitat, and posture. Yeah, Cyclades, group of birds in South America. In the I believe they're in the what is their family? The ovenbird family, the Herons.
Yep.
Right, Cyclades. Yeah, and they look like this. They have kind of a long, thin bill, but this is not a Cyclades, not in Leamington, Ontario.
Nope.
This is, in fact, a young European starling. We won't hold out any longer. Thank you, Ronan, for pointing that out. Yeah, they're very, very different from the European starlings you're probably familiar seeing, which this time of year are looking black with a bright yellow bill and very glossy and fancy looking.
And the other thing with starlings, juvenile starlings in particular, which separate them from cowbirds sometimes long before you can even get a look at them, is they are loud. Juvenile starlings, they flock up into these mobs and they just scream, and they're just very loud birds. And you often will hear them long before you see them.
Yep.
All right.
For sure.
Now we're going to go to Kentucky.
Ronan, this one's for you.
Yeah.
Cyclades. Matthew Winthrop says now he knows how to pronounce Cyclades. I am not sure if I got it right, Matthew. So, your mileage may vary. And you may.
I don't know if we're going to play that game. We could say Cyclades.
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 No idea. I have no idea. I assume it's like Latinish. So.
Cyclades.
Cyclades.
That's like a type of sandal. It's like, I want to go see the Cyclades. Getting way off the rails here.
Hardin County, Kentucky. What do we got here, Greg? We got a green bird.
It's on a feeder.
Kind of greenish brown with kind of a long, pale colored bill.
Yep, it's on a feeder, so we can tell how big it is. It's kind of lanky. It's got lanky. Yellow. It's got yellow underneath the tail, the undertail coverts. But overall, it's just kind of a gray green. And the thing we can see here again, structure, is look at the bill, that big pale bill, and the kind of the long body. We don't have a whole lot of green birds.
We really don't.
Or greenish birds like this.
And painted bunting, female painted bunting is greenish. Obviously, invasive parakeets.
Female
parrots,
orchard
this is
oriole.
not one. Female orchard oriole is another kind of greenish bird. The bill, orchard oriole will have a dark bill.
And in Kentucky are two tanagers.
The two tanagers, yep. Summer and Scarlet, the females of which and the young males of which typically are sort of greenish. And that's what this bird is. This is one of our tanagers. Summer or Scarlet, Greg, which one you lean in?
Well, we can see the wings are basically the same color as the rest of the bird, maybe a little bit of gray. But even if we couldn't, Scarlet Tanager is a compact bird. It has long wings and a short tail relative to this bird. It's a long-distance migrant. And it has a smaller bill, and the bill tends to be darker. So this bird's structure tells me it is a summer tanager, and the bill just adds more. The bill color just adds more weight to that.
Yeah, for sure. Summer tanager should be a pretty common breeding bird in kind of scrubby second growth forests that you find across the Southeast, certainly in Kentucky. Where I live, they're more common than the scarlet tanagers, which are more of an oak hickory forest sort of bird, and typically in higher elevation. Up in the mountains, you'll get more scarlet tanagers, but down here in the lowlands, it's almost all summer tanagers.
Chicky tucky tuck.
Picky tucky tuck. Yep. Kentucky tuck. Yeah, so these are actually related to cardinals. These are
Yes,
cardinalids.
they are
Now, they used to be
cardinalids.
considered tanagers, which is one of those taxonomic families, which has
The
been,
Thropidae.
um, yeah, which has been ripped to shreds. All the things that we used to
Yes.
think were tanagers aren't tanagers, and all the things that we thought were, I don't know, various finches and all sorts of weird things actually are tanagers. But
Spindalis and
the
seed
birds we call
eaters.
tanagers, yeah, for sure. The Galapagos finches, those are actually tanagers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but our summer tanager, our two tanagers in Kentucky, and obviously there's two more in the other parts of the western and hepatic elsewhere
Hmm.
in North America. They are cardinalids. They're most closely related to the northern cardinals.
Yep. Okay, I love this picture.
Another Florida bird.
Another Florida bird.
Birders getting their money's worth today.
And this is just cool because, boy, these two birds are very, very different.
They are very different.
And
Yep. This is the time of year when we see babies.
This is babies. Yep.
It's baby season.
And we're going to have to go with structure here because the plumage is just all over the place, and both of them.
That's true.
And I think we can rule out ducks by the bills. These
The
do
bill
not
is
have
not right
duck
for duck.
bills.
No, they have a long kind of tubular bill. It's not wide and flat like on a duck.
Yeah, and some of the other birds that loons and grebes. There is no grebe that has a big tail, or loon that has a big tail like that bird on the left.
They in fact look tailless.
They do.
The time.
And the bird on the right, young grebes are striped. They're not black like this. And I don't know what's going on with that bird's head.
On the grebe side, they're in Podicipediforms is the family name, and podiciped means foot-ended. So the family name refers to the fact that they have feet on the end of their bodies and not tails.
Yes.
There you go.
So I think we can sort of get this down to the coots and the gallinules and those kinds of semi-swimming birds. And we're looking at the bird on the left here. The bill is really a little bit too small, and the overall colors, especially the tail and that big tail with the white on the outer, sort of a white floof on the outer. It's a common gallinule, which is a common breeding bird in Florida. But the bird on the right, now this is where you go to your field guide and you start looking through those rails and gallinules and things, and you will see that the babies, what does Sibley? Oh, I'm surprised. Sibley doesn't really illustrate it very well. They are funky looking.
They're bald.
They are bald, but this the fact that they're together gives us a little bit of a clue, although not all that much, because in Florida,
probably safe to assume.
But the red bill on the one on the right, and the baldish head, and the black overall plumage, that is another common gallinule that is just much younger, relatively.
Baby.
It is a baby.
Yeah, so people note coot. They've asked coot in the comments. That's a fair guess. Gallinules and coots are actually quite closely related. They're in the same family. But the adult does not have the shield on the front, so the coot has that kind of weird shield on the front of their head. The bill almost feels like it kind of goes up a little high. This one doesn't have that. And I'm not sure if coots breed in Florida. Perhaps people can correct me if I'm wrong. I know that they're present in big numbers in the winter, but I
they are found all year round in Florida, according to Sibley.
I'm not going to argue with Sibley, so. But I think it's safe to say that if these two birds are together, that they.
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this again, and we may have to call this one back, possibly, because my memory told me that American coot has a dark bill at that age, but Sibley draws it with a reddish orange bill and a bald spot, just like the bird on the right. So we may have an American coot fledgling here. and
I don't
not
know.
a
I'm looking
gallinule.
at some pictures. I'm looking at some pictures of fledgling gallinules, and they look very similar.
Okay, so we
I
might
think
not
it's
have
safe
to.
to say that it's. I
It's
just Google
it's
searched
it,
common gallinule chick, and it looks close enough that I would be fine with it. They have a
okay.
they have a red bill with a yellow tip, and this one does appear to have that.
Yes,
I'm
it
not
does.
sure
And
if
all right, so
each
my memory was correct. Jay Weirley is adamant that it is a coot. Um, I don't.
They
I'm.
both look really similar.
They do.
I'll just say
They
that.
do.
Coot
If there was
chicks and
some way to,
gallinule chicks look very similar.
if there was some way to prove this was a coot, I'd be right with you. If there was some way to prove that it was a gallinule, be right with you on that one too. Look for the adults when you see them at this age.
Yeah, I would say because it's with an adult gallinule that it would be the most likely
Yeah.
guess. I think
I would imagine the gallinule would sort of chase it off at this time of year.
my guess. Fair enough.
And
All right,
our last,
here's another
our
bird that we
last
get
bird,
frequently.
Our last bird of the day
another
is
Florida.
another.
That's three for Florida.
Yeah, they just kind of got bunched up today.
Florida bird.
So we've got a bird that's in the mud, sort of in the grass here. Very streaky, kind of colorful actually. It's got some rich browns and
Yeah, I'd
maybe
give you
some
that.
yellows and kind of long legs, and the wings aren't too long.
long
The
legs.
tail's kind of long. I mean, what the bill is that sparrow, Nate?
Yeah, so I'm thinking back to the cowbird that we looked at
Mhm.
before, and structurally it's very similar. So I would say that this is probably going to be in the same family as that cowbird, the icterids, the blackbirds and oriole family. And but though this bill looks a little bit longer, and the streaking is a bit more intense. Young cowbirds are frequently kind of streaky as well. And as Dave Irons pointed out in the Facebook comments, one of the most frequently misidentified birds in North America. I would agree with him on that. I think Dave wrote a really interesting piece on juvenile cowbirds in an older issue of Birding magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Something to look at in the archives, calling it back to the archives there. But yeah, this is going to be an icterid. It's in a marsh in Florida. This could be one of our blackbirds, but we're getting close to 2:00. I know we both got to go soon. So
Yeah, we both.
I'll cut to the chase. This is a female red-winged blackbird, and a very, very worn plumage as well. So we talked about, summer birds looking very worn out and the plumage looking really scruffy. This is definitely one of those birds.
Yeah, and another interesting thing to note just before we go, because like you said, we both got a run here. I would guess, and this is just a guess, and I just bring up this guess to point out something about female icterids in particular. You'll notice that there's like a suggestion of the male plumage on this bird. So if you called this a young male red-winged blackbird, that may be correct. Because it's got a black tail. There's a lot of black all around the
right.
nape, and there's a little hint of red on the shoulder. That the male has.
Yeah.
But also, female icterids, as they get older, take on plumage characteristics of males. And especially Baltimore Orioles. You'll find females that
ducks do that too.
ducks.
That happens in quite a few birds.
Yeah. So, but yes, this is red-winged blackbird in non-red-winged blackbird plumage, which is one of the most confusing birds we encounter.
Yeah, we get it a lot. A lot of people go to sparrows, and they're not unjustified to do so. Jody Dupuy Ford says seeing a lot of those in yellow on their faces here in Louisiana. That is really interesting. Sometimes these female red-winged blackbirds are young males, as Greg suggested, do show quite a bit of color around their faces, kind of a yellow or orangish. That can look pretty rich. I don't know whether that's from foraging and certain substrate or whatever, or if it's a plumage feature. But it's something.
Yeah, I've seen them like that in the winter, so I think it's a plumage feature.
There you go.
Like up here in the winter, in the snow.
Yeah.
Well,
that's all we got.
That is it for us, and we are now both got a run. We just tipped over to the 1:00 magic hour. And
Greg, I thought we were going to do a short one today.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's a lot of good. There's a lot of people here and a lot of good conversation.
Get us talking about birds. You never know when to stop.
Don't know when to stop. It's one of my favorite Peter Gabriel songs. Right up here, aba.org/join. We would love
Help
you
us
to
out.
become part of the club, become a stakeholder with the ABA, help us do what we do. There's some really cool, fun stuff coming down the pipe for ABA members. Can't talk about it now, but watch this space. We will be talking about it soon.
Yeah, we got some good stuff. And Greg and I, well, I cannot entirely promise that we will be keeping to our every other week schedule. We're going to try really hard. I'm pretty sure we'll be back in 2 weeks. I don't have anything. Actually, no. Yeah, no, I'll be back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 2 weeks are good for me. So,
I have no idea what's happening next
online.
week. So.
Yeah, next week I'm going to be on. It's neither here nor there. But yeah, so we'll be back soon. We'll let you know. If you join the ABA, you'll be on our Flight Calls newsletter. You'll get our Flight Calls newsletter, and we always announce when we're going to be doing these a couple days before we actually do them. So,
and also,
thanks to everybody.
If you go to our website, even if you're not a member, you can get on our Flight Calls newsletter. There's a sign up.
You absolutely can.
At the bottom of the page, there's a sign up in our footer, and you can get the ABA newsletter, which is always every week chock full of really good stuff.
We got a lot of stuff going on. We like to promote it, and this is one of those things. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Greg for a pleasant hour talking about birds. We'll see you everybody in a couple weeks. Join the ABA, listen to the podcast, join us again. We'll see you around. Adios, friends.
Take it easy, folks.